Tonight on Bridge City News, a motorcycle group gives back to the Lethbridge Interfaith Food Bank and the Military Family Resource Center. A flag raising at Lethbridge City Hall today to celebrate India's independence. And at today's Lethbridge Farmers Market, we have our spotlight on KGTs.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Good evening, I'm Loris Alexander. Thank you for joining us. The compatriots held their annual motorcycle show and shine today. A barbecue, an indoor arcade, and an obscene amount of chrome. And more importantly, giving back to the community.
We're here today in Lethbridge supporting our friends with the Compatriots RC, doing a show and shine for charity. A couple different charities they're doing today. We have lots of vendors have come out to support. We got the barbecue going for burgers, come on down, have a great burger. And it's all for a good cause. And this is some of the work that we do in the motorcycle community, whether it be in Lethbridge or wherever in Canada.
Any proceeds to this will go help support the military side of it, and the MFRC helps military members and stuff if they're posted or overseas and all this other stuff. And they help the families that are behind while the people are on tour. So all the proceeds will support that there. So we have a lot of, or the compatriots have a lot of donations sent in from various businesses throughout Lethbridge area that donated their items that we're raffling off. So and that helps to draw on the money. We have the barbecue set up, which another was donated to us also. That'll help build the funds up for that. And then we have a few individual businesses that showed up to support. They're selling their product and they're helping with the donation side of it also.
We want to do this just to make sure we help our community. There's a lot of veterans and stuff in our community and homeless, and everyone needs help, and we're here to help. We have our show and shine going, and we're getting everybody judged up, and some awards are made, and we got custom plaques for everyone, and we have a full donation table full of stuff for bid and auction, and yeah.
We've had a few people asking us today why we're basically in white shirts with a black armband. This week we lost a member of the Southern Alberta Motorcycle Coalition member with the Unforgiven MC, was killed in a bike accident in Radium, BC. And his name is Stan Oja. And today, in honor and in memory of him, we wear our almost like funeral attire or memorial attire with white shirts and a black armband. So he's in our memory today, and we're riding for him.
Today, India celebrates their 74th year of independence. To commemorate that, the City of Lethbridge and the Indian Cultural Association raised the Indian flag at City Hall, where it will remain for the rest of the weekend, as a celebration of the Indian community in our city.
It is a very proud moment for us Indians here in Lethbridge and surroundings that, for the first time in Lethbridge, we were able to raise the flag on our Independence Day. And hopefully we will be able to continue the norm throughout the year. And good thing is we have some of the people of community with us today as well, with some kids and some of the elders and some of the people around as well. So I would like to thank on this thing that, it was a very, very good and proud moment for us. So Indian community we have been growing numbers every single year. So in 2014, when I came here as well, there were people who are here since last 30 years. We have one of the community members as well here present with us. So it's a proud moment to have all the people around and at least our community gather up together with us, which we are in a very small church before. So we are growing and we are involving Lethbridge citizens as well, along with Indian community. So Indian community is always like, we want to spread around our culture and we want to make everybody as a part of it.
We do try and keep in touch with our local community as well as our Asian community all over Alberta and Canada. And today is a very proud day for us. One of the reasons being my father was one of the freedom fighters with Mahatma Gandhi, and he was on the march many, many years ago. So it's a very special time for me and our young people here.
Bridge City News was at the Lethbridge Farmers Market today and spoke with Karen Taylor, a longtime owner of a local business known for jams and jellies. While those spreads are her specialty, these past few months gave her an opportunity to experiment with business offerings.
Started with when I realized how much produce, fruit trees that I had in my own yard. I have my own grapevines. I have apple tree, a pear tree, high bush cranberry, black currant, gooseberry, and a crabapple, and that's here in town. And started realizing to use some of my own product to make my jams and jellies. I started out with sewing, so that was my first love, was sewing jackets, and then expanded into a variety of jams. When everything was shut down, instead of just making puzzles, I started sewing using up my material that I had at home. Other than I had to sew according to what zipper length I had because Fabricland was closed, so I half-done jackets that I had to wait until I could get a zipper to put into it. So I've had couples who have bought the small jars of jelly or jam for their wedding, and they use them as wedding favors, and they put their own label on, like spread the love, or with their own names on the jams. I can make whatever variety they want, and it works out really good. This year I invested in a reader, they call them, and that's where people can use to pay with debit or to tap their card. So because I didn't know if people were going to want to use cash, so it's available if they need it, and it's worked out okay. For somebody who isn't technically smart, it worked out to be able to figure it out. You got to swallow any extra cost that it's going to take to keep your customers coming back. And people will suggest a flavor they wonder if I've ever made it, so I'll go home and try and find a recipe or make one up and make it. And then I have toe jam, which a lot of people get a kick out of because Dad used to always say, you eat your toe jam, so. And it's a mixture of fruit. It's 4 different fruits. It's not toes.
Brian Shields of Lethbridge was fondly known as the Cockatoo Man. Shields passed away on August 8th. BCN spoke with some of the people who were touched by the beloved pet therapist.
I had just gotten my motorcycle, and he had this little group he had going on. And anyways, I introduced myself to him, and I had a Honda motorcycle jacket, and I was riding a Kawasaki, and he looks at me and he's like, well, at least you got the bike right. He loved his Kawasaki's and he loved green. That was his thing.
Another close friend reminisces about how they shared their love for bikes.
Laying in bed at 11 o'clock at night, and he would call, wake me up. Hey, I'm bored, I want to go for a ride, let's go. Look at my wife, ask her if it was okay. Go get on my bike, and we'd go wherever. We could do anything, just go down and get a drink or bag of chips, or we would throw 200 kilometers on that night, just being us, having fun.
On July 17th, Shields made his last appearance at St. Therese Villa, a supportive living facility.
We knew Brian was going through some treatments as far as last year. He had his kidney removed, and then he was going through dialysis. So we knew he kind of came and went through that, even through dialysis. So on July 17th, we thought, as far as we knew, he was better. He was coming back slowly and making plans, and I guess he wasn't. Yeah.
Shields' death came as a shock to friends. Goodbyes aren't always easy, and today was no different.
I can't do it. No. It's too soon.
Just goodbye. That's all I got. I look back and I wish that I could have done one last ride with him, but it is what it is.
Recapping one of our top news stories, the compatriots held their annual motorcycle show and shine today. A barbecue, an indoor arcade, an obscene amount of chrome, and most importantly, giving back to the community. And a look at weekend weather. It was a balmy summer day today. It was mainly sunny with a high of 30 and clear skies tonight. Tomorrow, more sunshine with a high of 33 and a low of 12. There's only 1 week left to go in the federal Conservative leadership campaign, and the pressure is on. BCN's Hal Roberts spoke with leadership candidate Aaron O'Toole on why he's the right man for the job. That interview is up next.
The Conservative Party of Canada will be choosing its new leader this fall. The 4 candidates running to replace Andrew Scheer are Peter MacKay, Leslyn Lewis, Derek Sloan, and our next guest, Aaron O'Toole, joining me via Skype from Ottawa. Aaron, welcome to BCN.
Good to be with you, Hal.
First of all, let me ask you, why do you think you are the best candidate for the job?
Well, I've got the most experience. I served in the military for 12 years, worked in the private sector for 10 years, lived all across this country during my military tour, and then I served in the Harper cabinet, where I turned around a very troubled portfolio by setting out a vision, building a team, and taking on our adversaries, in that case, a public sector union. And I'm in the House of Commons now, Hal. You know, out of the contestants in this race, only Derek and I are current sitting MPs. I'm really the only one that can win this next election. I've won 3 times in the suburbs of Toronto. That's the region we really have to win more seats. I'm a true Conservative. I fight back against those who try and attack the Conservative Party and our members. And I can win where we need to win, and I'm ready to go in September. So I think overall, there's great people in this race. They're all my friends, but if we want to win and take the country back from Trudeau, I'm the choice.
Now, you say you're a true Conservative. Some people, Aaron, say you're kind of a red Tory, that only Leslyn Lewis and Derek Sloan are the true social Conservatives. So how will you win votes from those who call themselves true blue?
Well, look, our Conservative family has a range of folks, people that describe themselves as libertarian, social conservative, fiscal conservatives, foreign policy hawks on Israel and other things. I'm pretty blue on all elements. I do respect human rights and the decisions of our courts, but I'll tell you on issues of religious freedom, conscience protections, I was the first candidate to put out significant policies on these. I've supported free votes for all MPs, free speech for MPs. It's fundamental to our party. Peter MacKay obviously has changed his position on a lot of these things. So you can analyze each candidate and say who has 100% of what you're looking for. But if you do that across the board, Hal, it will be different for libertarians, red Tories, fiscal conservatives. I think overall, my military time, private sector, cabinet time, I'm strong on law and order and other issues. I'm true blue, but I want to keep the party united by respecting all views.
So, Aaron, let me ask you something then. You're going to have some MPs within your rank and file who are going to vote with their conscience and their heart, that are maybe pro-life. They view the traditional marriage as the only type of marriage that's around. So if you become party leader and they become prime minister, would you allow them to vote with their conscience, or will they have to fall into the party line?
With their conscience, absolutely. In fact, Hal, I think that's a strength of our party. Our party is actually the only one in Ottawa that is a true cross-section of Canada. People have a number of backgrounds and views, sometimes motivated by their faith and moral convictions. That is a true representation of Canada. We should not have political parties that are just reflections of the leader. Justin Trudeau wants his MPs to view everything the same way he does. I think that's corrupting democracy, to be honest with you. So I saw how Stephen Harper respected all views in the Conservative government he led for 10 years. We were able to make sure everyone was valued. And so I'm very proud that there's a lot of social conservatives with me who say, yeah, you might be a little more moderate than me on some issues, but you've always respected my role and my views in this party. You're going to respect free votes, the freedom of MPs to bring up issues that are important to them from their faith or cultural background. I think that's a strength of our party, Hal. I've defended it since day one. It was Peter MacKay who used terms like albatross and other things that I think shows he would divide the party. I will unite us.
So some people say you're more socially liberal but fiscally conservative, Aaron. Are you willing to march in the Gay Pride Parade next year, should it take place?
Well, when this issue came up, Peter MacKay said he was marching in the Toronto Pride Parade and wanted to call on all other candidates to do the same. I said I would not, because that parade has really become a left-wing expression. They don't allow police or military. They have anti-Israel floats. So I said I would not participate. But at the appropriate way where I can show support for all Canadians, including LGBT Canadians, as leader, I think we have to show that our party is welcoming of everyone. And that means in a diverse democracy like ours, we will have to sort of say, people that don't want the leader to march have to understand why I would make sure that I would show respect for people. The same way, Hal, I've said that MPs should not be forced to march either. That's part of our freedom as a country, is to make sure that people can participate or not, can have their values respected. That's what I will defend as leader.
So Aaron, what qualities would you say that you have over arguably your biggest competitor, Peter MacKay?
Well, certainly the biggest thing, I think, I'm the next generation of leadership, Hal. I was Stephen Harper's last cabinet minister. I've been in politics for 7 years. I've been in cabinet, I've got real experience, but I'm not a career politician. Peter was elected in the 90s, and he's not strong with the media. You've seen in this race, he has flip-flopped on everything from Jerusalem to other things. I think if that happens, the Liberal war room and the media will eat us alive. I've never had an issue with losing a debate. I'm strong in the media, I'm principled, and I know my files. I can take the fight back to the left and actually win. I win as a strong conservative in the Toronto area where we only have a few people. So I'm able to win the next election. Peter MacKay's not in the House, he can't win. And I really want to make sure we find a seat for Leslin. And Derek's already in the House, he's a colleague. I have a good relationship with him. We will unite and win, but I think I'm the only one that can do that for our party.
You know, I've noticed as well, there's a little bit of back and forth between you and Peter MacKay. You know, the two camps taking shots at each other, Aaron. It says in the Bible, a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. So shouldn't we see more of a united front when it comes to the Conservative Party of Canada candidates?
Well, you'll see, I have great respect for Peter MacKay. He was a very good defense minister under Stephen Harper. As a veteran who had friends that served in the Afghanistan war, I can say that. I say probably as many nice things about Peter every day. But it's important for us to really scrutinize the candidates. Who's been tested? Who under pressure performs? Who is going to be able to hold Trudeau to account for his poor judgment and ethical failings, or who will have their own history of gaffes and mistakes drawn out? I think a lot of our members thought that we didn't have a tough enough leadership last time, because on the campaign trail, our leader, Andrew Scheer, was surprised by a number of things. He hadn't really been put through the pressure of a race with 14 candidates. So I'm being tough but fair in this race to show that I've stood by my principles, I've defended them. I like to joke with my wife, my biggest accomplishment is I'm scandal-free in my time in politics, and I will keep it that way, because we need to be smarter and more disciplined than the Liberals, because they've got most of the media on their side. We have them working against us, so we need a leader that's principled and professional.
Now, speaking of scandals, I'm glad you brought that up. There's more controversy surrounding Prime Minister Justin Trudeau with the We Charity scandal. Now, this isn't the first ethics issue involving our Prime Minister. We don't have to look too far back, including SNC-Lavalin, the Aga Khan trip, not to mention the blackface controversy. Why is it that nothing seems to stick to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? Many refer to him as the Teflon man.
Well, I can tell you, in the last election last fall, voters in my province, in Southern Ontario, where there's 80 seats, they were looking to move away from Trudeau. And I think we did not run a good enough campaign. I think most Canadians know Trudeau is very phony. They know he's incompetent on the economy, and they will be looking who is ready to govern, particularly coming out of a crisis with $1 trillion debt, a $343 billion deficit. Who is ready? That's why I think being in the House, being someone that's held my own under fire. You know, Leslin Lewis has run a good campaign, but has never been really tested, hasn't been elected. I want her to get a seat and join our caucus and be a strong voice. But who can hold up under the withering fire of the Liberals, the NDP, the Green, and the media? It's me. If we can do that, Hal, I think a lot of swing voters are tired of Trudeau. They know he was late in his response to the COVID crisis. And now this ethical scandal where his family has benefited and he was helping friends, and we're talking about a children's charity here. I think a lot of Canadians are saying it's time for ethical, principled leadership, and that's what the Conservative Party can offer.
Aaron, you talk a lot about the seats to be won in Ontario. What about Quebec? How can the Conservatives win in Quebec? What needs to be done?
Je suis le seul candidat bilingue, Hal. I'm the only candidate really ready for the debates. Mr. McKay has had difficulties with his French, despite being in politics since the 1990s. Derek did fairly well for someone picking it up, actually. Ms. Lewis does not speak French. There's 25% of our seats are in Quebec. So I learned my French in the military. I joke when I'm in Quebec that I sound like an Anglophone soldier because that's how I learned my French in the military. But I'm ready to win debates in both French and English because I've got the capacity and I've got the strength to beat Trudeau and Blanchette, because I think Quebecers actually need a seat at the table. They don't need this separatist protest party. They need to see us as a viable force. I was on an interview in French with Saguenay Radio this morning talking about energy actually in the Saguenay region. So I'm confident we can win more seats there too.
How about energies? Let's get that pipeline built. What are your thoughts? Instead of having our tankers go all the way through the Panama Canal. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous.
You're right, it's ridiculous. That's why this is the second leadership, Hal, I've run on a National Strategic Pipelines Act, where I will make cabinet upfront decision to approve any pipeline that goes to Tidewater or to refinement capability in Canada. Those are in the national interest, and we need a prime minister that can articulate that. It's interesting, before I joined the military, Hal, my first real job, inspecting pipeline for TransCanada Pipeline. So I've also worked in and around energy, even as a lawyer later on, and I've been a strong voice as an Ontario MP, because the whole country needs to understand that our energy success, the innovation in our oil and gas sector, is a win for all of Canada. And that's what the national interest pipeline approach that I will champion will help tell Canadians. We need to get the best possible price for our resources. I'll fight for this.
Aaron, you made mention of the fact that our deficit is over $340 billion, the debt is over $1 trillion. How would you help balance the books and bring us back to black, especially during tough times like this during COVID-19?
Well, we have to take a page from Stephen Harper and the late Jim Flaherty, who did this very effectively after the last global recession in 2009. They had a disciplined plan to get back to balance. It took 5 years in that case, but they held the line. No raising of taxes and a clear private sector rebuilding. That's what I'm offering. This will be a process that will likely be a decade to get the fiscal house under control while keeping taxes low. We actually may need to provide some additional supports for small businesses who are failing right now, but we also need a renaissance in the private sector. We need the energy sector to rebound. We need a softwood lumber agreement. We've had dozen mills, forestry mills close across the country, Hal. We've had bad trade agreements under Trudeau. So we see the auto industry, GM in my riding, where my dad worked when I was a kid, closing this last December after making cars for a century. So we're becoming very uncompetitive as a country, and we have to grow to our GDP to make sure as people come off these programs like the CERB and others, they need jobs. So I will make sure we have a private sector renaissance while we get our spending under control, while keeping taxes low. That is the special approach we need to have.
What about the support for our farmers? A lot of people in southwestern Alberta, are very passionate about that too, our agriculture sector.
Yes, in fact, I'm very fortunate to have the support and special advice of Jerry Ritz, who was the agriculture minister under Prime Minister Harper, very well regarded. We've talked about the need to diversify our markets. We're going to see more disruptions as the global community takes on China and some of their actions with respect to the WHO, respect to trade. So we need to diversify, and we need to make sure that some of the insurance and crop support programs are bankable and are much more predictable for farming families, because there's been uncertainty in their income, and these are meant to sort of be backstops. We have to fix that. I'm committed to doing that as well. So I think opening new markets, getting the best possible price for beef, pork, grain, oilseeds, it's a critical part of our export market. I've worked on this in the Harper government, and with help and advice from people like Jerry Ritz and others across Western Canada, we're going to make sure agriculture remains a cornerstone of our economy.
Now, the controversy surrounding the extradition of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou continues. Many argue that China arrested the two Canadians, Michael Spavor, Michael Kovrig, in retaliation at the arrest of Meng Wanzhou. Now, the PM has stated that he will not do a prisoner exchange because it would make other Canadians and put their lives at risk. They'll be in jeopardy now. How else can we bring the two Michaels home who are being charged with spying, and Aaron could potentially face the death penalty?
Yes, I said from the beginning, Trudeau has dropped the ball on the two Michaels, particularly because they didn't very quickly reach out and engage at a senior level after they were arrested. And by the time months later they tried, China wouldn't return their call. I've said, when I become prime minister, I will give 30 days for the Michaels to be released, or Magnitsky sanctions will be levied against certain officials in the Chinese regime. These sanctions we've used against Russia, Venezuela. When corrupt state actors are abusing the international rule of law, that should be used. Sure, it is as much symbolic as anything else, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some of our allies to take the same approach to sanction communist officials for these actions. This is stealing the liberty of people because they want to pressure Canada to release a sort of someone who's almost royalty within the communist system because of the Huawei connections. We need to stand up as a country for the values we believe in and have other countries of a democratic nature like Australia, the UK, the United States do it with us. I've been the strongest voice against communist China for the last 5 years. I've passed bills in the House. I asked Trudeau about WHO corruption with China 2 years ago in the House of Commons. So with me, we will have a principled foreign policy and we will stand for our values and our allies again.
Conservative Party of Canada leadership candidate Aaron O'Toole, thanks for joining me today from Ottawa.
Thank you, Hal.
Initially, those in Canada and the United States rejoiced after being able to head back to bars, beaches, and sit-down restaurants again. Unfortunately, that headlong rush to the public square has caused COVID-19 to rear its ugly head with widespread reports of spikes in infections. Now, up until recently, one nation has handled the COVID crisis with a great deal of success, but they're now seeing their own second deadly wave of the virus. Joining us to discuss how Israel has handled this pandemic is David Rubin, author and former mayor of Shiloh, Israel. David, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you on. And by the way, you are joining us from Jerusalem, which is amazing.
That's right. Absolutely.
Now, David, when we first booked you for this interview, Israel was doing phenomenally well handling the pandemic. Cases had dropped significantly due to at least a 2-month lockdown. But then it looked like things took a turn for the worse once businesses opened up again. So, David, what's happening in Israel? Why don't you paint a picture for us?
Okay, well, let me explain what the problem is. In Israel, as you pointed out, we had the lockdown for 2 months, and it was almost total lockdown. People were only allowed to go out to get their necessities, just food, medicines, and essential work, and that was it. So yes, the cases were way down. We thought that we had gotten rid of it completely. And then the country started to open up over the span of about 2 weeks. Everything opened up with the exception of the airports. And the problem is that as it opened up, and yes, people were wearing masks and people were doing social distancing, but not everyone was doing it to the extent that they could, and there was minimal enforcement. And before we knew it, everything's spiking again. So the situation now is that a lot of the things that were done before are not being done. In other words, every country has to find a balance between the saving lives, fighting the disease, fighting the virus, and at the same time, not shutting down the whole country. You just can't, you can only do that one time, really. I mean, if you do it more than once, you're going to destroy the whole economy. Yeah. And people are going to lose jobs, and people are going to commit suicide, and there are going to be all kinds of traumas.
And that has been happening all over the world, as we've seen, right?
Yeah. So we have here in Israel. There's an organization that I founded called the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, and the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund deals with trauma in children who are terror victims. So what we saw from that is that these terror victims had extra trauma from being locked down for 2 months and being in their homes and not being able to go out. So now that everyone is back, schools have opened up, the center of the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund has opened up, people are back to work. We don't want to close down again. Now, there were a couple of things that were done originally that were very good, that were very unique, and that's why we were doing so well, which is that the defense minister at that time had set up a network of coronavirus hotels.
Okay.
And what is that? In Israel, there's no tourism industry now. Usually we have a booming tourism industry. Everyone wants to come to Jerusalem. Everyone wants to see Israel. But no one's coming in because no one's allowed in right now because of the virus. So these coronavirus hotels were set up in all of the major hotels, and all of the lightly infected and moderately infected people were forced to go to those hotels to be treated. So they were removed from the rest of the population and they were treated, and that's how we got the numbers down. There were over 30 coronavirus hotels at that time.
Wow.
Now that everything's opened up, so these hotels have been closed down. And that was a big mistake. And now they're talking about how to open them up again. And that needs to be done quickly in order to get the rates back down, while at the same time keeping the economy running.
Yeah, that's a tough balance. Now, you had mentioned before that during the lockdown, everything was actually, you said that everything has since reopened except the airports. So that means they're not letting anybody in or out of the country. So if the numbers got down to almost nothing, how did it resurge? Are the borders to Jordan and other neighboring countries closed as well, or is it just the airports?
Yes, all of the airports and all of the neighboring countries, no one other than Israeli citizens are allowed to come to the country, returning Israeli citizens. However, it's natural that when everything opens up and people are together again in crowds, walking in the streets, congregating at wedding halls, at conferences, it's inevitable that there's going to be a spread of infection.
Right.
And then people go back into their homes and they infect everyone in their homes. So the key to solving this problem is not necessarily shutting down the whole economy. It's to have restrictions and to separate those who are infected from those who are not infected.
Yeah, exactly. Now, how many cases are there now in Israel? Do you know? In one instance, I heard that there were 1,400 new cases in a single day, and I think that was a couple of weeks ago. Have you heard the latest?
Well, just 3 days ago, it was up to 1,800 per day, which is a lot in a small country like ours. But at the same time, since then, it's gone down. So we're down to about 900 as of yesterday. But it's in flux. It has to be watched very carefully. But actions like the ones that I just described have to be taken.
Right. So what is the Israeli government choosing to do now? So I've been reading that everything opened up, and now are they being forced to close again?
Well, there are different opinions. Right now, there's a dispute within the Israeli government about what to do. The prime minister wants to shut down. He wants to have a total shutdown again for at least a week or two. And there are others within his administration who are saying, no way, we can't do that. That would be a disaster to close down the economy again. So there are different opinions, and it remains to be seen what's going to be. But But as you can tell from everything that I've said so far, I am not in favor of closing down the economy. I think that you need to be aggressive in confronting the virus, and at the same time, not to close down the economy because it creates more problems than it solves.
Mm-hmm. So when did the economy reopen up again? They were closed for a couple months, and then they made the decision to reopen everything, obviously. How long ago was this? Was this about a month or so, right?
It was about 1 month ago. It actually we started opening up in the beginning of June. By the middle of June, everything was completely opened, as I said, with the exception of airports and tourism. But it happened so fast that it was a mistake to do it so quickly.
I see.
And we see the results.
Yeah.
Because we opened up without preparing for the possibility that there might be a resurgence.
Yeah, and they didn't phase into it either, is what it sounds like.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, we're hearing that one of the biggest culprits have been the reopening of schools. So when did Israeli students go back to school, and what's happening now?
I disagree with those who say that one of the main culprits is schools, because the studies show that there aren't too many children who infect the adults. It's usually an adult. When we've had a number of cases, quite a few, of schools closing down because a teacher comes into the school with coronavirus, or a staff member comes in with coronavirus, infects everybody, including all the children, or doesn't infect all the children. But even if all the children aren't infected, the Israeli policy is that you close down the school immediately, and everyone has to quarantine. But look, I think the research is inconclusive about to what extent children infect adults. I don't think that happens too often, from what I've seen.
Yeah.
And I think it's a terrible mistake to have all the children go back into lockdown. It's, children are so psychologically damaged, as I mentioned earlier. They're so psychologically damaged by having to go into quarantine, into lockdown. So I think the politicians need to study the research, and they need to see the way that we can reopen our countries safely. That's the key, to open up safely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting what you were saying about the kids being a little bit slower to get infected. When it comes to school closures, is this something that other areas of the world, like Canada and the US, should continue doing as well? I know that there's a lot of controversy actually in the States right now about reopening schools. Canada, there's a similar predicament. What's your opinion on this? I know that you're saying it's important to get the kids back in class.
Well, it's important to get them back in class. It's important to see how you do it and how you do it safely. In Israel, we have this strategy of capsulization, that classrooms are divided, and there are plastic, nylon walls put up, barriers within the classroom, which helps prevent the spread of the virus, or perhaps even between the teacher and the children. There are various techniques used. Some places have used masks and found that to be successful. So a strategy needs to be developed, but it's essential that the children are back in school, and we have to think in terms of different places where they are. There are neighborhoods, there are cities that are much more densely populated. In Canada, there are a lot of rural populations that are not densely populated, where social distancing can be easily done, and it should be done. So when you're in very dense neighborhoods, we found that those are the areas, those are the neighborhoods that spread the virus more frequently and more widely. So it's very important to have that in mind and to think in terms of how to open up, not if to open up.
Right, yes. And you know, you have areas in the US right now that are just spiking out of control, one of the worst hit countries right now. So how do you think they should deal with that? They've closed and they've reopened, and some of the governors are calling to close again. How do you handle a situation where the coronavirus is spiking out of control?
Well, look, there are situations where a closure is necessary. But not without a strategy for reopening. You can close down, and then you have to quickly come up with a strategy of how you are going to reopen. Because as I've said, the psychological damage is too great. Psychological damage to children, psychological damage to adults, and we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. You know, we do want to save lives, of course. At the same time, we want to heal lives, and we want to heal those that have been emotionally wounded. So yes, separate the infected from the non-infected, and then do everything else that's needed: the social distancing, the washing of hands, the masks, whatever is needed. But not closing down an entire country, because then you just create other problems that will live on for generations.
That was David Rubin, author and former mayor of Shiloh, Israel. We'll see you again sometime, David.
Thank you.
Artificial intelligence is a big part of our society. You see the new technology in our phones, hospitals, our vehicles, in so many industries. To talk more about it is Dr. Jeff Zweerink. He's an astrophysicist and a senior research scholar with Reasons to Believe. It's an organization which combines science together with faith, and he joins me via Skype from Los Angeles. Jeff, welcome back to BCN.
It's good to be here. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Now, give me a brief description about the ladder of causation. Now, this helps identify the key steps for an artificial narrow intelligence to move into an artificial general intelligence. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so you know, when I'm thinking artificial intelligence, growing up when I did, you know, this is the HALs, the R2D2s, the things that are sentient, aware of who you are, aware of who they are, and kind of interact in the world. And we've got a lot of AI out there right now, which is this kind of narrow intelligence, which can play a game of chess or figure out what you're saying and ask you or order pizza online for you. And so, but the difference between those are very dramatic, because what all of the AI that we have now basically maps this set of inputs to this set of outputs. And so it's a very basically correlative way of looking at things. It's like, I see this, therefore that means this. And so there's this kind of seeing aspect to it. But if you want to get to what humans do, or that artificial general intelligence, you got to move up to the next higher rung, which is not just seeing the correlations, but actually intervening to make something happen. So, you know, say I want to build a pool in my backyard. I can have it look and say, all right, these are the kinds of pools you could put in there. That would be a correlation type thing. But an intervention would be, say, what happens if I remove a wall from the house? Or what if I take the tree out? And then to move to the next letter of causation, the third rung, it's asking, you know, what if I move from Los Angeles to Canada? How would that impact my building a pool? Because the things that happen in Los Angeles are very different from Canada when it comes to building a pool. So that's kind of imagining what could be beyond what is already known.
You know, Jeff, I used to have a pool in Southern Ontario, man. The amount of work I had to put in that thing, cleaning it every day. Don't do it. Don't do it. That's all I'm saying. Now, AI such as Siri, Alexa, and even Tesla cars are almost eerie in how they respond and interact with us. What rung do these fall on, and how much does AI actually anticipate versus respond to our requests?
Well, all of the AI that's out there that I'm aware of is kind of on that first rung of causation, that they're looking at, again, mapping inputs to outputs. So they're seeing this, and therefore that means this. And there's some algorithm for how they choose between different options, but it's seeing this and correlating with that. So all of the AI that we have is at that level. But what you notice is that it's remarkable how it looks like they're doing something more. It looks like they're anticipating, but in reality, what they're doing is saying, okay, given this input, very complicated algorithm and process of mapping it to an output, but nonetheless, it's just this correlation. Input goes to that output.
I want to talk to you a bit about some concerns I know people have with when it comes to autonomous vehicles. What happens if somebody was to hack into the computer, the system, and actually kidnap somebody, change their whole course, or maybe cause the brakes to fail? I mean, there's so many things can happen if technology fails or if somebody hacks into the system.
No, that's actually a very good point. I mean, when it comes to AI, it is one of these really powerful tools. It can do great goods. It can spot diseases and bad or spots on X-rays far better than people can. It's got that sort of capacity. But the more powerful the tool, the greater good you can do with it, but also the greater damage you can do with it. And so that really calls us as humans to make sure that as we're developing this, we don't just look at the technological side. We also have to look at the ethical and moral side. How do we deal with this powerful tool so that the damage is not caused, but we're actually using it for good?
Now, what are some of the myths or misconceptions associated with artificial intelligence?
I think one of the things that plays out often in that is that we see artificial intelligence, and you mentioned Alexa and Siri, and how it's like they're anticipating and they're learning, and we hear those words and we think very humanly about those. That when I'm talking with you, I hear you saying something, and I think, oh, maybe he's going there. I'm actually thinking, okay, where do I fit into this conversation? What's he trying to do? I'm thinking about it a particular way. Whereas Alexa, Siri, all of the AIs that are out there right now, again, they're just saying, all right, these inputs mean these outputs. They're not trying to consider, what are you doing? Where are you going with this? How can I help? It's really just trying to do what it's programmed to do in that sense. And in that sense, while it is learning, it's not like it's saying, we've been talking this way. Maybe it would be better if we talk this way. That would help us get there better. All it's doing is saying, well, I tried this and this was said, no, it didn't work well. So this worked better. So I'm going to go that way. So it learns in that sense, but it doesn't have that higher level cognition or thinking and saying, hey, what's going on? How do I help accomplish this goal better? Because all it is designed is to do is what it's the goal that it's been programmed to deal with.
Now, we've heard that artificial intelligence can learn, but can it think outside of what it's been programmed in to do? Like, can it look ahead and imagine, or maybe backwards to reflect on what might have been? Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a subtle question, because often, I'll give a little bit more concrete example. I can talk about learning where a ball goes. And so I could say, I know that if it's going with this speed at this angle, I know it's going to land there. And then I could say, I don't know what happens if it's a different speed and a different angle. But as I grow, I recognize, wait a second, there's a formula I can just plug this into. And so now that I know the formula, I can deal with a whole wide range of situations. But even though I'm being able to, quote unquote, learn what's going on in this situation, it's still the same thing. So that's what the AI is doing. It's taking what is in this general programming and saying, okay, I can work in that realm, which is very different, again, than what humans do. Because when I go and play chess, I'm looking to win. But I could go halfway through the game. I could say, you know what? This game has been fun trying to win, but now I'm going to see how long can I play the game. There's nothing that an AI will do at this point where I'll go in there and say, you know what, this goal isn't very good. I'm just going to go a different way. Nothing about AI does that at this point.
If you want to play a long game, maybe try Monopoly or even Risk. That's also pretty long too. Now, with the third rung requiring the ability to imagine something that does not already exist, is there still a possibility that artificial intelligence technology can really advance to that point?
Well, there are people who are developing the mathematics that allows an algorithm or an artificial intelligence to do some of those, not just see, but actually intervene and gather new data to see what might go on, and also to even imagine new scenarios. But the best I understand it at this point is there are aspects that it's going to mimic of human behavior, but it still is not doing it in the way a human does. Because again, what allows the computer to do that, or the AI to do that, is there's just this incredible wealth of data that it can process through and figure out. So it may be able to imagine or get to the place where it says, okay, let's look at an entirely new situation that doesn't exist. Say maybe if I didn't move to California, where would I be today type thing. but it's not going to be able to do that nearly as universally or as generally as humans do, because there's also a relational aspect of the way humans behave. And putting that into a computer, I think that's one of the things that really distinguishes us from a computer. You think of what Spock does, the ultimate logical machine. But ultimately, what we like about Spock is that he behaves rather humanly. He actually engages in a relationship.
Now, even with the vast advances in AI, how does its limitations reveal the uniqueness of humanity?
Well, I think as we begin to think about what is an AGI and how do we get to a general intelligence, what that forces us to do is ask, what is it about humanity that's unique and distinct, and what do we need to do to make a computer do that? It used to be that if we could make, or the thought was, if we could make a computer that could beat humans at chess, that would be a general intelligence, or maybe at poker, or maybe at this. And what we found is that every time we've achieved those goals, we say, all right, we can actually build computers that are far better than humans at chess or any well-defined game, quite honestly, but they still just approach it very differently. We approach it from a thought process, but we also ask, how do we play into this? So when the computer wins the game of chess, it never says, yeah, that was a great game of chess. It doesn't say anything. It just won the game of chess. Whereas I would be very excited if I could beat a grandmaster playing chess, or my team won the Super Bowl. The AI just doesn't think that way. So there is this distinction in how humans are. We're aware of where we stand in the situation, not just accomplishing tasks like an AI would do.
Yeah, you're right. It'll just say game over. Thanks for playing. Now, what might that uniqueness say about us, where or who we come from, and our purpose in this universe?
Well, I think the fact that an AI doesn't think that way, that we do think that way, leads to the idea that perhaps this is not all there is. If we can imagine worlds outside of our universe, maybe there is a world outside our universe. If our ability to perform tasks is important, but we also are driven to relate to people, maybe we're designed to be relational. And I find that fits very comfortably within Christian theistic thought, that God in and of his being is relational. He's created us in his image. Therefore, we are relational. We're emotional beings. We're social beings. We're also engineer type beings. And so we've got this great wealth of who we are, or the attributes that we share, that ultimately flow from being made in God's image. The point is to something that's far bigger than what we are. And I think as we get closer to creating an AI, we see that AI will not match us, that it's made in our image. We see that we're also made in somebody else's image.
Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, and Bill Gates have expressed concerns in the past about the risk posed by artificial intelligence, perhaps that we may rely on it a little bit too much. What are your thoughts?
I think that's a definite possibility. We seem to, as a people, be driven towards increasing comfort and avoiding hardships and working less. And that tends to lead to giving away things that protect our freedoms and our liberty and our capacity to take care of ourselves and manage new situations. And so the more we become dependent on it, I really do think that's problematic, especially if we're designed to work and be social and conquer and go out and explore this world, which I think, again, that flows out of a Christian worldview.
How about AI potentially taking away people's jobs as well? There's always that concern too.
I think that's somewhat inevitable. And there's a good part and a bad part of that, because there are certain jobs that are dangerous and humans get hurt. And so if we can have AIs do that, that just becomes a lot easier. If your screwdriver breaks, you may be sad, but you go to the store and buy a new screwdriver. If you break an arm and you can't work, that's a bigger deal. So there are aspects of what an AI can do that will help humanity. Again, we have to be careful that we don't kind of have that Wall-E type approach where we want the AI to do everything so that we can just sit back, play our games, watch TV, and enjoy sodas on the couch. That's not healthy for us.
So how do we ensure the goal of keeping AI's impact on society very beneficial?
I think it's incredibly important that as we're developing the technology, we also need to be equally serious about thinking about the ethical, theological, and philosophical ramifications. And I know there are people who've thought about that, and there are people involved in that conversation, but we seem to be kind of driven by what can we do at this point. And I just want to make sure that we're very intentional about making sure we're thinking about, is this a good idea? Do we really want to do this? What does it say about our place? And might we be doing something that ultimately is detrimental to humanity in the way we're developing AI? I think if we can do that, we can use the power that AI will bring by avoiding the consequences that would come by using it improperly.
Dr. Jeff Swearing, Senior Research Scholar with Reasons to Believe, thanks for joining me today from Los Angeles.
Enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.